While two-thirds of the nation prepares for its postseason play in bowl games, USC sitting on the sidelines, but much to talk about and much to prepare for the 2022 recruiting close in February. And of course, the season that fall. We got Matt Zemek on the line from Trojans Wire. Please join him right there tracking USC football. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing well, Mark. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you so much for that. Same to you. Appreciate you being here every Tuesday to set us up on USC, the Pac-12 in the nation, and many ramifications and dominoes continue to fall. But Lincoln Riley, of course, securely in place. There's an interesting story that you brought to light and filled me in on concerning former Georgia Tech running back Tasha Choice, who was at Georgia Tech. And you take the story from there because it's quite the soap opera.
It certainly is. Days of Our Lives, Young and the Restless have nothing on this one, Mark. So Tasha Choice, he was identified as being the running backs coach at USC. He identified himself as being with USC on social media. The Athletic, other outlets identified him as, quote unquote, having joined, unquote, Lincoln Riley at USC. So it's not as though he was mulling it over. He was in the USC camp. He was in the USC fold under Lincoln Riley. And then a day or two later, he bolts for Steve Sarkisian and Texas. And of course, Lincoln Riley from Texas, obviously he had to recruit against Texas at Oklahoma. And of course, he's still trying to recruit Texas at USC. Like, that's a priority for him. You know, he's hired his offensive line coach, Josh Henson, from Texas A&M. He was making a run reportedly at Brandon Jones, the co-offensive coordinator at Houston under Dana Holgorsen, before he settled on Henson. So like getting guys from the state of Texas on his staff to recruit Texas. And Tasha Choice, he former Dallas Cowboy running back. He has a coaching history in the state of Texas as well. Like, Tasha Choice was supposed to help him recruit the state of Texas. So Tasha Choice joins USC. He wasn't just, considering it. He joined. He made the move from Georgia Tech. Bruce Feldman and others had reported on that several days ago. So he identifies himself as a USC coach on social media, and then whoopsie, he goes to Sark and Texas. Now, so Oklahoma fans are saying, "Oh, at two, Lincoln. How does it feel to be on the other side of a betrayal?" And of course, that's a fascinating little discussion about, is this exactly the same thing as Lincoln Riley going to USC? It's really interesting. I mean, I think that Lincoln Riley didn't betray Oklahoma, though I will say Sooner fans have every right to feel betrayed. Like, I get it. I know Oklahoma's history. Lincoln Riley was supposed to be there for a long time. Bob Stoops handed him the keys. He wasn't expecting Lincoln Riley to bolt after 5 years. Lincoln Riley was supposed to become the next great entrenched Oklahoma head coach. So I understand the argument. I respect the argument. But what Tasha Choice did is really and truly a betrayal in my mind, or at least it's a fuller, deeper betrayal, because, I'm sure that he and Lincoln Riley had a conversation or six about recruiting in the state of Texas. So he has that conversation as he's being onboarded at USC, and then he goes to Texas. So he has that insider information. That's kind of like a football coaching equivalent of insider trading. That's much more unethical from where I stand than Lincoln Riley bolting for Oklahoma. I mean, Lincoln Riley didn't say, "I'm going to stay the coach at Oklahoma." He only said, "I'm not going to be the coach at LSU," which, as far as it goes, that was accurate. So, he didn't shoot down any USC rumors or anything. He shot down the LSU rumors. And, maybe his agent, Trace Armstrong, was playing a bit of a bait and switch. I mean, we can acknowledge that. But this is not nearly as unethical as what Tasha Choice just did. You either choose between USC and Texas, or you stay at Georgia Tech. You don't go to USC and then 48 hours later go again to Texas as a second move after gathering that intel from Lincoln Riley. But, Oklahoma fans are having a ball, and I don't blame them. They should be able to laugh at it. And here at Trojans Wire, we can take that. We're big boys here. We're doing pretty well. Thank you very much. So, it's all part of the game. And, it was unethical on Tasha Choice's part, but USC is going to be okay, and it's a really fun soap opera right before Christmas. So
I
it's
absolutely
good for
understand.
business.
Yes, I absolutely understand how a fan base would have fun with this, considering that they were just jilted. Understood. But let's all understand that in the coaching business, in college football in particular, because that's what we're focused on here, there is no good way to separate from your former team. It's just the timing of it, the way it's done. None of it can be done in a reasonable manner that would please people or in any way. It's just the timing of when you're leaving a team, your former program, out to dry during recruiting and during preparation for the postseason. But there's no other way to do it. Otherwise, these coaches get criticized, but there's no other way to do it. Otherwise, they would never leave their job and go to a different job. So. All right. Yeah, Tasha Choice, that's a completely different deal. So that's what that is there. Getting away from that particular incident to Lincoln Riley's building of a program, which has to do with a coaching staff and it has to do with recruiting, of which he has increased a bad situation exponentially to a decent situation, at least not to USC standards in regards to this 22 class, but projecting out to February, he's certainly reeled in some quality players. So where do you think we stand with all of that?
So with the commitment of Domani Jackson this past Friday, USC is at or near number 70. And before the early signing period, USC was down there at 101, 102. So you're already seeing a jump of about 30 spots. And then you might have noticed in terms of the Pac-12, you might have noticed, Mark, that Jed Fish down in Tucson at the University of Arizona, he flipped an Oregon commit. And that dropped Oregon from 31 to 46. So Oregon was, about 70 spots ahead of USC. So right now it's about 25. And then we have some USC prospects who could announce in early January after those high school All-American games. And then on into early February, I think we're looking at a situation, Mark, in which USC and Oregon are pretty much going to be right there at the same spot, give or take 2 or 3 spots. They're going to be pretty much right around, I'd say like number 40 to number 45, right there together in the composite Pac-12 rankings. So that would be a great result for USC if that happens, to immediately erase the gains that Mario Cristobal had established and consolidated over several years in Pac-12 recruiting. I mean, Lincoln Riley had to do this in midstream. Just imagine what he can do with a full recruiting cycle next year. So for USC to already be on the same plane as Oregon by late January, early February, that's advantage USC in the Pac-12 if we're strictly comparing the Trojans and the Ducks, the two teams that have been at the top of the conference in recruiting.
The face of any football program these days can change so quickly with the coaches leaving. That's a situation we've always had, but you combine that with the transfer portal and with the opt-outs during the postseason and early entry into the NFL draft, and you get a situation like Oregon. Instantly, within a couple of weeks, their best player, Kayvon Thibodeau, he's announced he's played his last game. He's preparing for the NFL. They've got a new head coach in Dan Lanning. Poof, they've got a new quarterback in from the SEC in Auburn in Bo Nix. How do you think that changes the landscape in regards to the Pac-12? Bo Nix is obviously a dynamic playmaker who also will give a few away.
He certainly will, Mark. And, if you're sitting here at USC, you're thinking, well, I'm not exactly scared of Oregon's quarterback. And it's not, I would say Bo Nix is an upgrade from Anthony Brown, but boy, it's hard not to get an upgrade from Anthony Brown. So it's not a massive upgrade from Anthony Brown. It's still someone that, USC defensive coordinator Alex Grinch should feel very comfortable about being able to defend. When you look at the transfer portal quarterback marketplace, UCLA and Chip Kelly got Dylan Gabriel. Now if Dylan Gabriel had gone to Oregon, like that would have put USC fans in a very different spot emotionally compared to Bo Nix. Like UCLA got a much better quarterback upgrade than Oregon did. And since Chip Kelly has not fixed his defense at UCLA, something we all know very well, I mean, USC has to like the way the chessboard is setting up. It really seems as though it's still USC and Utah as the two best teams in the Pac-12 heading into the off season. And we had the Pac-12 schedule come out. That's a newsworthy a development that we had since we last talked, Mark. So we had the Pac-12 schedule, and Utah has to go to Oregon now in mid-November. They're flipping that late season date. This past season, it was Oregon going to Salt Lake City in mid-November. Next year, it's going to be Utah making the trek to Eugene. And USC, much like 2021, doesn't have to play Oregon or Washington this season. The Trojans don't have any prolonged road trip. They do play 2 road games in a row, but they're separated by an off week. So USC does not have to play road games on consecutive Saturdays at any point in this 2021 season. Oregon has a much tougher road, especially in September. Oregon's schedule is front-loaded, obviously, with that Georgia opener, but then Oregon's first conference game is a road trip to Washington State, which should be very good. Was a Pac-12 contender this past season, surprisingly, but it was. I mean, Washington State was in the mix in the Pac-12 North race until the very end. So USC, once again, like 2021, got a favorable schedule. There's just a little bit of a difference here. Lincoln Riley instead of Clay Helton. So USC definitely in position to do well in the Pac-12 given its schedule. And the other thing, though, is that Utah has a definitely tougher schedule than USC. Utah gets USC at home. That's the Utes' one really big advantage. But looking at the schedule, I can easily see a scenario, Mark, in which USC loses at Utah, but finishes 8-1 in the Pac-12, and Utah, which has tougher road trips, finishes 7-2 anyway. USC fans have to like the way the Pac-12 schedule lined up for the Trojans, and you combine that with Bo Nix being at Oregon. If we do get Trojans Ducks in the Pac-12 championship game, USC has to like where it's situated right now. That's just the bottom line.
USC's out-of-conference fare in 2022 includes the opener against Rice at the LA Coliseum, that traditional Stanford game on the road in week 2. Then they're back to non-conference play against a pretty interesting Fresno State bunch that has given all sorts of Pac-12 teams a fit. And then, of course, Notre Dame late in the season, that finale after the UCLA game. Got Matt Zemek on the line.
This brings up something, Mark.
Yeah,
this brings up something. Keaton Slovis is in the rumor mill at Notre Dame as a possible transfer.
Yes.
Can you believe this? Keaton Slovis, I mean, it's not, we don't know if it's going to happen, but he's in the mix. He said that Notre Dame reached out to him in the transfer portal a few days ago. So imagine Keaton Slovis versus Jackson Dart as opponents in the first Notre Dame USC game played in LA since 2018, because they never did play that 2020 game due to the cancellation related to the pandemic. What a scenario that would be. And then just imagine if you have any national stakes attached to that game as well. Wouldn't that be incredible?
Otherwise, from what I'm hearing, Keaton Slovis also connected to Stanford, Cal, and possibly Nebraska.
Yes, and I've also heard Pittsburgh to replace Kenny Pickett. That's another rumor that's going around here.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was only a couple of years ago that USC had a transfer quarterback head out to Pitt eventually, and I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Max Brown.
Max Brown, yes, absolutely. Got Matt Zemek on the lane. Trojans Wire breaking down USC football for us. We touched on some Pac-12 recruiting. We're not going to get down to specifics, but in regards to the overall landscape, you hit on USC. So much work to do. But Lincoln Riley, again, he's not brought in any kind of large haul in terms of volume of personnel, but the recruits have been high level. Damani Jackson, Raleek Brown, etc. Then he's aiming toward February. Same thing with Oregon. You mentioned the rank dropping because of the one flip to Arizona and Jed Fish, but they've only signed 7 players, so they've got a ton of work to do. And you're talking about the traditionally best recruiting program, USC, and you're talking about the most recent recruiting giant in the conference with 3 consecutive #1 finishes in the conference. Still kind of, I don't want to call them in limbo, but they've got so much work to do toward February as opposed to what would typically be closing out a class almost with only 1 or 2 spots left going into February.
Well, Lincoln Riley said in a press conference this past Friday that he is hoping to change 35 spots on the roster. Now, that is a huge number to wrap your mind around in terms of the level of change that Lincoln Riley thinks is necessary. But USC fans are very much in agreement with that. I mean, whether he can achieve it, that's its own separate conversation, Mark. But in terms of the aspiration, USC fans think yes, because Clay Helton with the low quality of recruiting, the low quality of player development, Lincoln Riley is sizing all of this up, and he's saying, you know what, I'm not going to try and coach these leftovers. I really need to turn this thing over in a very big way. So fans are very much on board with that. Now comes the execution part. And USC, in terms of the transfer portal, where Lincoln Riley really wants to make a huge impact to supplement the recruiting, we've seen fewer than 10 transfers thus far. And one would like to think that in the coming weeks, maybe after the holidays, you will see a lot more USC players on the current roster enter the transfer portal, which will enable Lincoln Riley to get maybe not up to 35, but certainly to come close to it. Maybe high 20s, maybe even 30. So like you're going to see a lot more transfers as they go through the early winter period workouts and have more conversations and consider their options. And they look at everything that's happening as the recruiting cycle continues on into late January, early February. So you should see a lot more transfers, but whether Lincoln Riley can get to that 35 number, that's really ambitious. But obviously, what's the old saying? If you don't, aim high, you're not going to get there. Like you have to at least have that big goal so that even if you fall short, well, maybe you still turned over 25 spots, which is still very, very substantial. That's obviously a part of Lincoln Riley's philosophy at USC.
Matt Semick delivers for us each and every Tuesday here at the Voice of College Football. We so much appreciate his contribution, but to get his full array of work, certainly you got to head on over to Trojans Wire. And certainly Matt's here covering college football for us. And again, the work over there on Trojans Wire is exceptional. So please join Matt right there. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Hopefully we can catch up with you next week.
Mark, your work is exceptional too. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Thank you.